You're listening to a special presentation from Night of the Living podcast, Zoned Out with Freddy and Joe, where we talk about the classic television series, The Twilight Zone.
Classic, classic, classic.
That's the most excited I get about anything, is The Twilight Zone.
It's a good thing you get excited about. It's exciting.
I'm very excited. I'm still excited. We're about halfway through season 1. We got one today. The original air date was February 5th, 1960.
Nice.
This is the first of 4 episodes directed by William F. Claxton, who notoriously directed Night of the Lepus, the movie about the giant killer rabbits. It is totally awful. But he also will direct The Jungle, these future Twilight Zone episodes, The Little People, and I Sing the Body Electric, which is one of the Bradbury ones. It's a good one.
That's a famous one.
Yeah, and you got written by Richard Matheson this week. This was also a short story by him. And the title at the end of the episode, you're like, oh, okay, it could work at 3 different stages in this, you know, what does it mean, the last flight? We got more Bernard Herrmann stock music in this one. And last week, I forgot to mention, was also all stock. They had no original compositions for that episode.
Interesting.
And this one, if you're a classic film fan, Brutus from Cleopatra, that's Kenneth Hay. He stars as Lieutenant William Terrence Decker of the Royal Air Force. This guy, he spent... I'm sorry, go ahead.
Seems like the only person who might actually be English.
Yeah, he's really English. He's really the real deal. He's kind of known for... he started like the angry young man character in like British theater.
Oh,
apparently.
Well.
Yeah, that's kind of his thing. This kind of sadly, in the last 15 years of his life, he spent in a care home because he choked on a chicken bone in a restaurant and it deprived his brain of oxygen for so long that he needed to be cared for. Yeah, isn't that awful?
That's terrible.
But on the bright side, before all that happened in 1979, he appeared in a movie that I just found, and I really want to watch now, called The Bitch, written by Jackie Collins and starring her big sister Joan Collins as the bitch.
What? Wow.
And it's a sequel.
To what?
The Stud.
Are you serious right now?
They're like erotic thrillers. The Stud came out in 78 and The Bitch came out in 79. I know The Bitch is streaming on, I think, Pluto or one of them. But when I found out it was a sequel, I'm like, I got to see The Stud first.
Right.
But our lead in this is in that movie, Kenneth.
Wow.
Ooh, excuse me, Kenneth Hay.
That's tremendous.
Yeah, I thought that was the most interesting thing. Alexander Scourby is Major General George Harper. This guy was in The Big Heat, and his last role was in The Stuff. You remember The Stuff?
I never saw The Stuff, but it's one on my list to watch because of you reviewing it on the NOTLP podcast.
It's a fun movie. It's Larry
podcast.
Cohen who did Q, The Winged Serpent, and a bunch of great kind of trash movies. But The Stuff, he's in that. You can tell when you hear his voice in this episode, he's got a great voice. But he had a company called Lectern Records, and he would do talking books for the blind.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, so that's something we have in common, actually, because I composed music for talking books for the blind. Not the same company. It was for Cincinnati Association for the Blind.
Interesting.
So that's my Twilight Zone connection.
One of the companies I used to work for in Minnesota Public Radio, one of the things they did was they had a separate service they helped with, which was specifically, I think it's local to Minnesota, but they did a lot of like connection with that. So they did a lot of broadcasting related to that, which is
so
really
cool. I love it.
Yeah.
You know, and it's knowing that it's specifically for, that audience makes you think about it differently too as a creative.
Right.
It's really cool. But Lectern Records, he did like the whole Bible apparently too on cassette.
Wow.
Yeah. That's a lot of reading and not something that's easy to perform.
Unabridged. Yeah. That is a lot.
Yeah.
So I kept thinking that he was both of the main American military guys. Were thinking were in other movies, but I don't think they were. The guy you were just talking about, I thought was like the head military guy in what's the movie? Animal House. He
Oh,
has that same kind of look to his face, but I
the
guess
guy
it's a
who
totally different guy.
wore the actual helmet in Animal House. Is that who you're talking about?
No, not the younger guy. There was like an
Oh,
older guy.
okay, I
Maybe it was
gotcha.
Stripes or something. No, it wasn't Stripes. I feel
God, I
like it
haven't
was.
watched
I
either of
don't
those in
know.
a long time. Classics.
Oh, yeah.
I'm sure
Yeah.
they like. I know the last time I saw Animal House, it wasn't. It was still funny to me, but it was also like, oh, you just can't do any of this anymore. It doesn't play, you know. Like the
Right.
only reason it plays
Right.
for me is because I grew up in that era, you know. You're like, yeah, this it wouldn't.
Right.
I can't
Right.
imagine a current like a young audience seeing that for the first time and getting anything out of it. I'd be
Being like,
surprised.
this is all terrible. But I got to say, my one moment out of that movie that I will cherish for the rest of my life is not the food fight scene. It is Shout, the dance scene
Yeah.
with oh my gosh. I love that song and that whole thing. Like I want to live that out sometime, like do like a flash mob of it or something.
I
love
love
it.
John Landis, his
Yeah.
movies.
Yeah.
That's your another Twilight Zone connection. He directed Animal
Ooh,
House,
yeah.
but he also directed a segment of Twilight Zone, the movie that is notorious because of the deaths, which I'm sure we'll get into detail
Notorious.
at some point. Um,
Yeah.
This episode also starred TV actor Simon Scott as Major Wilson. This guy was in 2 Best Picture winners. He was in The Life of Emile Zola and Gentleman's Agreement, and then he was in 6 others that were nominated. So he's the legit deal, right? His peers respect him, and now he's making TV, and they're okay with it.
He's got famous face. Like I can't. He's like one of those where I can't place it, but I'm like I swear I've seen this guy in a series or something like that before. I can't quite nail it down though.
You probably have. I think he's got so many credits. And then, well, he was in The Adventures of Robin Hood. Have you seen that? The old one from '38.
With like Errol Flynn.
Yeah, I think that was Errol Flynn. Yeah,
Nope.
sounds right. So
I'm like with this character. No, I haven't seen that.
interesting thing about him too is in '36, there was only 24 actors that were given suspensions from Actors Equity and the Screen Actors Guild, and he was one of them. So he was a little bit of a
Really?
troublemaker. Ooh.
Ooh, you in trouble?
I guess he was anti-union. It would be the thing. I'm not sure.
Oh,
I'm just guessing from that kind of punishment, right?
no
But,
idea.
yeah. Do you want to do the synopsis? Last flight.
Sure. So this starts out with the voiceover right away, and we hear witness Flight Lieutenant William Terrence Decker, Royal Flying Corps, returning from the patrol somewhere over France. The year is 1917. The problem is that the lieutenant is hopelessly lost. Lieutenant Decker will soon discover that a man can be lost not only in terms of maps and miles, but also in time. And time in this case can be measured in eternities. And he's flying through a cloud and he's looking around and he can't see diddly squat. And he sees something down below, goes down and lands, and he lands his little biplane, which I don't know if you remember anything about World War One. It's that they all used propeller planes. There were no jets and that sort of stuff.
You know what always
And
fascinated me about those is that there's a
What's that?
timing belt on those planes that their guns shoot through the propeller.
Yes.
That's crazy.
That's insane.
Yeah, like the timing
Yeah.
and the level of just engineering involved so that the bullets don't strike the propeller blows my mind.
It's all mechanical precision. There's no computers, there's no circuits. You know, that's mind blowing. And the fact that they started the plane by spinning the propeller.
Yes.
It's like, what?
It's simple.
How does that even, and you see it, the guy does it in this episode as he's trying to get his plane going again. But, and so I thought it was hilarious. The plane, you see it kind of land, and I couldn't quite tell if they were models or if this was real, and it looked
Looked real.
But yeah. But like they must have sped some part of it up because there's one part where the Jeep's like swinging out by the plane and it looks like it's like, it's on two wheels almost at one point. They're just like, and so the Jeep is like trying to chase down, and you can't see me in the podcast, but I'm like waving my hand. It's like trying to flag this guy down, and he's kind of like, what? Huh? What? And so they get him to stop, and they're like, what are you doing, you crazy clown? Oh, and before this, when the plane landed, in the kind of commercial break at the very beginning of the episode, it pans over, and it was Lafayette Air Force Base, and so there he landed and like rolled by a big jet and all this other stuff too. So it's showing you that it's modern days, but there was there was a music cue in there at one point where it was like dun dun dun, like this old plane's landing at this modern field. What? And it just hit me as like, okay, what's the? And it's like, oh yeah, this didn't probably, they didn't do this. This story probably didn't happen before, right?
Right.
Or if it did happen, they never, people in the 50s probably would have made that connection faster and gone, whoa, something's really weird. Anyway, so they land, the guy jumps out, and everybody's the one guy, Wilson, who's the guy you were saying is like he earned his chops, and
Yeah, that's
he's
the guy.
showing up there.
That's the guy who was in
And
Robin Hood and all that.
That's the guy. And he's like, what is going on? What do you like, he can't even like form a thought to ask him what's going on. And Decker, the guy from the plane, is like saying nothing. They're like, what, do you understand me? What are you, French? He's like, no, I'm British.
Ew.
He pops out, and they're starting to have like a real brief conversation. He's like, I'm just flying by, and I'm gonna stop doing that accent now. And and they were like, where are you? He's like, where am I? No, I'm not gonna keep doing. He's like, where am I? And he's like, can't you tell it's an American Air Force base? And he goes, oh, look, what all of this? We had no idea you were so advanced.
I love that little bit.
Like, yeah, just a little jump in there. And so they're like, we're taking you in. So they haul him over, and everybody's dumbfounded by it. And of course, as they're like marching him into the office, they have to do the obligatory, he's walking, and then a female soldier comes walking out, and he's like, what?
Yeah, I love it. It was subtle, actually. He didn't ask
rubberneck.
any follow-up questions or anything, but it was obvious what, he's like, holy cow.
Yeah. You have ladies here. And so he goes in there, and the whatever, what is he, a general? What is the major?
Yeah, the major general. Hey, I'm a major general.
Modern major general?
Modern major general. That's the guy who was in the big heat and stuff.
Okay.
Scoury. Alexander Scoury.
Scoury. And he's like,
Bible man.
This is all very weird, but Decker comes up, and the modern major general, the major general, Harper, there it is.
Yeah.
Harper looks up, and he's like, what the hell is this? He kind of gets a smile on his face, like, who's this clown? And the English guy, Decker, comes up and does like one of those hop skip, kind of stands at attention.
Yeah.
And kind of clicks his boots together, as was the style at the time. And he's kind of introducing himself, and he's like, with the UK's Royal Flying Corps. And he's like, you mean the Royal Air Force? And he's like, no, sir, the Royal Flying Corps. So they go back and forth, and they're like, why are you in a costume clowning on a modern Air Force base? And he's like, what are you talking about? I just landed. And it's kind of like, it was interesting. Like, I don't know how realistic it was, but it was kind of fun how they played it out. And at one point he's like, what's the date? The Wilson goes, what's the date? And he goes, March 5th. And he goes, what year? He's like, well, 1917. And he just kind of shakes his head. Wilson does.
I wonder, is this the first
And
time that's become a trope where somebody's like, no, what year? That line, what year, is like the time travel shorthand. It's like, oh, okay, we're orienting the guy. I don't know who was the first to do it, but this was definitely an early one, I think.
Yeah, totally. And well, it's funny. There's a moment where they go, no, it's March 5th, 1959. And he's kind of stunned. And then they zoom in on his face and he silently mouths, like you can see him like very clearly, his gears grinding as he's trying to process this. And I have subtitles on when I watch these episodes. it just said, when he did that, said no audio. So it's like trying to say he's not saying anything. He's just mouthing the word mumbling. 1959. So this was like the mind blown. Oh, what? And so they start talking, and he's like, well, we're locking you up for, until we know more about what's going on. So they set him aside, and then the major general and the other fella start talking, and they're trying to figure out, what's this guy's deal. And the major general's like, this guy's I don't know what his deal is, but he's not for real. And you see that Wilson's kind of like, he seems earnest. Like he's like, I kind of believe this guy. And so they're trying to suss out, based on clues. So for instance, the major general has his effects. They took his stuff out of his plane, and they've grabbed it, and one of it included a gun and all the bullets in it. So they empty all the bullets out of the gun, and the major general kind of puts it in his drawer. And the Wilson's like, well, he would have had his gun on him if he was going to come in here and shoot somebody. Oh, I skipped the part. The major general says, don't act like you're not here, because this big honkin' representative from the Royal Air Force is coming by.
Yeah,
it turns out
McAnally or whatever his name was.
Yeah,
the
I
old
can't remember
guy.
his. McKay. We'll just call him Leadbottom.
Yeah, Leadbottom is what his nickname.
We'll get to the nickname.
Mecca.
Nope, I'm not going to do that because that was a thing on Pee Wee's Playhouse. Turns out that was all real bad. So I'm going to skip over that. So he knew this guy McKay, and he's like, they're like, the Air Vice Marshal is coming in, and he's a World War II hero. And he's like, Vice Marshal? He's like, he can't be over here. And they're like, why not? It's like, he's dead. Dun dun dun. Commercial. And comes back, and he's this is where Wilson and the Major General are talking, and he's like, well, maybe he's going to shoot the Major General. He's like, he would have had his gun on him. Like, he wouldn't have stored it in the plane, And so, again, they're trying to figure it out. Wilson goes to talk to the prisoner, or to Decker in the cell, and Decker, they're talking and talking and talking. It's like, well, you're going to meet him. He's like, I don't want to meet him. He's like, I refuse to meet him. And he's like, well, you're going to meet him. He's like, all right, so I'll meet him. And
fine.
They keep going back and forth. And it turns out Decker reveals his fear that McKay will out him as a coward, because he would go up. And so he goes through this whole thing about how when he would go flying, he would fly back and forth to avoid the enemy and just hope that he waited long enough that he could come back. And it seemed like he was out patrolling. But he was terrified of actually getting shot at or anything like that.
I love that.
And he
what he talks about shooting his own plane with his pistol.
Yeah. So I took sometimes I grab a swath of script here, and this is one I really like. He says he used to fly back and forth, and he seems almost like relieved to reveal his cowardice in this moment. And he goes, sometimes I think I'll land behind the German lines, and I'll even let myself get captured. The pilots always get the best of treatment, But I'm afraid of doing that even. I'm afraid that I'd be discovered and discredited. I couldn't bear that. And I have to carry on the self-delusion, I've actually fired bullets through the cockpit walls so the chaps will see them. and be impressed. God help me. And Wilson is listening to all this, and he's like, and he comes back with, it isn't a crime to be afraid, Decker. He said, this happens to all of us, and like it's normal. So it's actually kind of like almost a bonding moment.
Very kind.
Yeah. And I think you're seeing the outreach of Wilson, whereas the Major General is just like, forget it. And it's interesting because as he's talking about this, the genuine fear of combat, it really stood out to me in how we've seen that in other movies, especially around movies like Platoon and Full Metal Jacket and these sorts of modern movies that we've seen about an era of a war, that our previous generations grew up with. And to see that kind of, because that was it was not a all volunteer army. You get a lot more of those people who were like, I'm going to shoot my foot.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to blow my foot off so I can get out of this place. And so it just made me think about that, about the awfulness of war and all the kind of destruction that comes from that. And
it's a theme they go back to over and over again in the Twilight Zone. In particular, cowardice in war is a key theme that will pop up over and over again. But Serling was in World War II. He was like a paratrooper.
Yeah.
And saw combat too. So it, with him, probably taking Richard Matheson's story, I'm sure he had some input on that too. I don't know if Matheson served or not, but that's like cowardice can apply to anything in life, I guess.
Well, and it's one of those. It reminds me of that story of Christopher Lee when he was filming the Lord of the Rings movies. Have you heard of this story?
I don't know. Tell me the story, Joe.
Oh boy! So Christopher Lee, in the filming of, I think it was Two Towers, maybe, was talking to Peter Jackson, the director. And Peter Jackson's like, well, I want you to do this. And then kind of, he'll stagger back like this. And Christopher Lee, I'm remembering it just very, very vaguely. But Christopher Lee's like, no, you wouldn't do it like that. And Peter Jackson's like, what are you talking about? He's like, well, when you have to stab somebody, it looks like this. And so their body would fall back like this. And he's like, taking that all in, realizing that Christopher Lee saw combat and was a veteran and had actually stabbed people. I mean, like, he knew exactly what he was talking about because he'd actually done it,
Yeah. He also knew everything about Lord of the Rings.
Right. Oh, did he? I didn't know that.
Yeah. Christopher Lee was a scholar of Tolkien.
Really?
Yeah. That's one of the reasons I think they got him to do it. Yeah. He knew all of it. He knew this stuff inside and out.
That's wild.
Yeah. Isn't it?
He's kind of a legend. I mean, just all the movies, what were the Castle
Hammer
films, right?
Hammer. Yeah.
I was thinking Castle. Castle's another.
Castle Rock makes movies too.
Okay.
But yeah, Hammer movies. He was in like Ghost Story for Christmas, those specials they would do at BBC. And he had a metal album. So there's that.
Really?
Yeah. You should listen to it sometime. Yeah.
I should. Man.
But I'd never heard the story about him stabbing somebody. That's new to me.
Well, just that he had actually had experience, in hand-to-hand combat in a war zone. And so he knew more of what that might actually look like and feel like or be like, which was just really interesting. And so tying that back to this, it's easy to see, and it's really interesting when it's informed by people who have lived that experience to say, very few people with maybe the exception of Theodore Roosevelt, which I think would even change now, who've seen combat and find it like super glorious and, awesome and would want to go back to that. You know what I mean?
Well, yeah. You think about, what was the dang movie? All Quiet on the Western Front.
Oh yeah.
Which they remade and is awesome. From what I've heard.
Either one, but yeah, I've heard they're both really good.
The original I love the original, and I've heard that their remake is like very faithful to that.
Awesome.
Haven't gotten around to it yet, but the original is like one of the best war movies. It really gets it.
Yeah, you get the feel from it.
Just the idea of people who these young men who went off and they couldn't come home again because they were all messed up. They even made a sequel to All Quiet on the Western Front, which was like about the story of the soldiers who survived coming home.
Coming home.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So all of that ties back into this kind of moment where he's talking very openly about his cowardice and how he's afraid, and he's convinced that he's like, well, did you actually see this guy McKay die? And he's like, well, no, but he was surrounded by like 8 planes. He's like, come on, there's no way he made it out of that. And so he's feeling really guilty about that, and so it's at one point too. There's in the episode they're like yelling at each other, and so like, but it seemed very like military guy, like, well, what do you think of this? Well, I don't. Oh, and they go right back to conversation, but like when their tempers escalate, it comes right back down again. It's just really interesting. So he says to him basically, maybe somebody helped McKay, and that boom, a light bulb goes off for Decker, and he's like, wait a minute. He's like, maybe this is my opportunity. Maybe that's why he's alive now, is because I got back there.
Yeah. This moment is what makes the episode for me.
Yeah, it's really a cool twist in that he's like, I gotta get out there. He's like, I can get back to that cloud. Maybe, I got here somehow. Maybe I can get back there, and that's my opportunity. And so he's like, no, we can't let you out. And he hauls off and just clocks him. And I'll swing back to this later, but it was kind of a very bold move at some twist where he's just like, no, this is it. I can redeem all the past crud that was back here, and I can die a hero, or I can live a hero. He hits him, goes running off, and of course, this is one of my favorite things: watching old timey actors run. He does the whole floppy arm thing as he's running, whereas as he starts slowing down, he's like, whoa, whoa, with his arms swing out. Watch for it in old movies. It's hilarious. So he goes running around, and he's booking around at some points. And then like, it's kind of cool. You hear this loud noise as a helicopter comes down, and it's McKay, but he doesn't necessarily know that. He just covers his ears because it's so loud. He's just not used to anything that loud. And he finds his plane. Again, this is the moment where he like jumps up with the propeller and like he's got to swing it and spin it a couple of times to get it going. And some mechanic guy comes up and is like, hey, get off there. And he's like, whoa. And he gives him a smack and kicks him, knocks him off, and takes off in his plane and disappears. Oh, he's about to disappear, about to drive off. And Wilson appears behind him, and he's got a gun. He's like, stop, or I'll blow your head off, and I'll shoot you. And he's like, then go ahead and shoot me. I'd rather be dead. And Wilson's like,
guess that cowardice is fixed.
Yeah, right. And just pauses for a second and is like, I don't know. He's got to make that decision.
Yeah.
And he doesn't shoot him. And Decker takes off, watches him fly in the sky. The next scene is not Decker, but it's Wilson in the Major General's office. And he's like, you screwed up big time. You let that lunatic out of here. You're in big trouble, mister. And in that moment, McKay comes in. And they're like, oh, how was your flight? No. And they get him in there. And Wilson, at a few moments after he walks in and sits down, is like, hey, do you know a guy named Decker? And McKay's like, well, I should. He saved my life. And so he starts telling the story of, we used to fly together, which is what Decker said. And he said, and or we used to fly separate most of the time, which is what Decker said, so that he could, hide himself and not fly into combat. And he said, this day we happened to be together. And at one point I thought he was going out on me. In other words, I thought he was going to leave and run away. And then McKay was dogfighting with the other planes. And he said Decker came out of nowhere and shot a bunch of the planes, allowed him to make it out of there. And he was a hero, but he was shot down and died. And so he really confirms this story. And as they did, the Major Generals made the connection in his head. He comes back and he's like, did they ever find his personal effects? The Germans usually gave those back when they captured somebody died. And the admiral's like, no. And so he goes to his desk, pulls out the stuff and hands it to him. And it's like, here. He's like, where the devil did you get this stuff? And so they're like, well, we have a story to tell you, but you might want to sit down. And he's like, and Wilson's like, yeah, you might want to sit down, lead bottom. And the thing I forgot to explain later was at one point when Decker was explaining how he knew McKay, he said he was flying over some Germans one time and got shot. And he got shot in a rather embarrassing place.
Like Vanilla Ice.
He didn't like to spread the word around, so it was kind of their own secret. But he used to call him Old Lead Bottom because he got shot in the butt. Did Vanilla Ice got shot in the butt?
I think he was stabbed in the butt. His butt was attacked. That's all I know.
It was a rear assault.
Yep.
So yeah, and then Wilson is the little tongue-in-cheek joke of, you better sit down, old lead bottom. And the guy turns around and he's like, what did you call me? Wah, wah, wah. And then they fade out, and there's the outro voiceover. Dialogue from a play. Hamlet to Horatio. There are more things in heaven and earth than are dreamt of in your philosophy. Dialogue from a play written long before men took to the sky. And there are more things in heaven and earth and in the sky than perhaps can be dreamt of. And somewhere in between heaven, the sky, and the earth lies the Twilight Zone.
I like it, but it's also a little too vague. This episode is not like one of the greats for me. I like it.
No, me either.
Yeah, but I don't love it. The ending makes it though. Him becoming the hero, for me, I'm like, okay, that's really makes the episode worth watching. But the first two acts are kind of, like you said, kind of boring a little bit. Yeah. Yeah. And I think
it's
that's
interesting.
Dated, maybe.
Go ahead. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And I wonder if that part of it's just like, I don't know, maybe it could have been just the story being kind of lame, but that redemption arc, it really does make it. I mean, it makes it more interesting, and it's cool that it's like blatantly supernatural on some level. Sometimes you get that, sometimes you don't, but that they're just like, hey, it's a white cloud,
right? You'll notice too that I love how the Twilight Zone, you get land, sea, and air on the Twilight Zone. You get stories set on ships, on everywhere. Like, I just love that you never know from season to season as you work through them. You're like, where you're going to end up. It could be anywhere.
Yeah,
it keeps it fresh, even when they're recycling storylines. It still feels fresh because they're like, we've done it, but have we done it on a boat, or have we done it? In a small town.
What about this angle? Yeah. One of the other things that really I like about it is, some of the earlier episodes, especially Time Enough at Last, to me had a real downer ending. It was just like, kind of, well, damn, that sucks,
Yeah.
But I really like that about this one, is that it does have that redemption arc, and it makes it a much more positive ending. And I was thinking about this a lot more because I'm listening to an audiobook right now called Die with Zero. It's a whole book about making the most of your money in your life, to making the most of using that money to have the best experiences at the right times, so that you finish with zero and you've had all these memories to
that should be easy for me
going.
Finishing with zero. I mean,
I could finish with zero right now.
I can finish with less than zero. I'm going to leave a debt behind for my loved ones.
Well, this guy is Bill Perkins, I think is his name. He's like, he starts out at the beginning of the book and he's like, look, I know this is not for everybody, but it's a general concept that will help kind of hopefully give you an opportunity to think about maximizing what you've got when you've got it, and how to do that. And what I like about it is there's one point about it where he's like, especially at the end here, I'm listening to, he says, just when you look at the things, if you take this kind of stock of your life, and you are a relatively young person, let's say you're in your late teens or early 20s, he's like, be bold. He's like, do things that scare you, do things that you can fall down, because at that age you can fall down and get up and fall down and get up over and over and over again, and you're resilient and you don't have as much to lose. You don't have people depending on you.
This reminds me of the
opportunity.
Trust me about the sunscreen speech.
Oh yeah,
I forget what it's called.
Yeah. I can't remember that one.
If you Google "Trust Me
wear
About the Sunscreen," you can find it. There's a recording of this great voice actor giving advice to young people graduating school.
Is it always wear sunscreen or something like that?
I think it ends with "Trust me about the sunscreen" or something about that. But he says, "Live in New York, but not so long that makes you hard. Live in LA, but not so long that makes you soft." And then all that stuff in between. Yeah, it's pretty clever.
World wisdom. But So what I like, the reason I tied it to this was that, Deckard took the opportunity of like redemption. He could have gone on with whatever he was doing. He could have this or that, but he's like, hey, this is an opportunity for me to come back and get rid of all this stuff. It's not too late for me to be the hero who, I aspire to be, even though I'm afraid most of the time. So I don't know, just that redemption arcs, man, I love them.
Yeah. It gives us all hope. All of us screw ups out here in the world.
It can be problematic for people who have had, a bad record, but the fact that it turns around, I don't know. I like it. It's,
me too.
Good possibilities.
Hell yeah. The last flight was pretty good. Not great. We're getting much better plane episodes. We still have Nightmare at 20,000 Feet coming up.
Oh.
When it comes to Twilight Zone plane episodes, it's the best one.
That is so good. The next up is The Purple Testament with Dick York from Bewitched.
Yeah, that's right. I think this one was
watched.
Is this also a war story? I can't remember.
Yes, this is a war story. And he alluded to at the end of the episode, he said it's like a guy, he can predict people's deaths, I think.
Yeah, when he looks in the mirror,
the Dead Zone.
I think it has something to do with like he'll look at somebody and he'll see their aura, maybe change his color. Anyways, we'll get into it when we cover it. But I think that's, if I remember right, this one I haven't seen in a really long time. I remember this being one of, as far as acting and everything, this being one of the standout episodes with performances, but I can't remember the details very well.
Well, we have lots to look forward to next week.
Hell yeah. Thank you so much, everybody.
Goodbye.